My wife and I were married when we were fairly young. We waited for 8 years before we had Matthew. Matt was particularly gifted at mathematics. He was on the math team at high school. Matt was picked on every question at every meeting he was ever at. And I don't know if he ever got any of them wrong. They would present a problem. Matt would say, the answer is 1,948. And it was. My son loved being a college professor. He was in the 4th year of a 6-year tenure track. He was probably going to get tenure in a couple of years. He enjoyed teaching. He enjoyed his students. He had no intention of ever retiring. He figured he'd teach the rest of his life. But of course, obviously that did not happen, so.
When I arrive on scene, there are just police cars everywhere.
The area that this occurred in wasn't an area that was really prone to this type of criminal activity.
I was briefed by the police officers that were on scene, and they immediately walked me to the back door of Matthew Weiser's residence. There were a lot of indicators that there was somebody that maybe used a tool of some sort to kind of break open that door jamb.
So we made our way through the back door and then up a single stairwell that led to a hallway where Mr. Weiser was laid face down in his own apparent blood.
When we actually did end up rolling his body, I observed one single gunshot wound right above his right nipple.
It started to look more like this was a burglary gone wrong. In burglary cases, we know that the motive behind burglaries is stealing things.
We knew from the very first day when we went to Matthew Weiser's house, he was a pretty big gamer.
The only thing that we found was missing was the Nintendo Switch.
I remember seeing an empty Nintendo Switch box, and I started to observe things that were related to the Switch. Oh, there's an empty Zelda Breath of the Wild game. There's an empty Mario Odyssey game. We've already now searched his office. The Switch isn't in his office. There isn't any other place that the Switch could be. And so the thought occurred, did they take the Switch? We didn't ever have any sort of precedent for tracking an electronic video game system to solve a homicide. So I knew that it operated off of Wi-Fi. If the Switch was taken and turned back on, it may indicate some information about who turned it on or where they turned it on. I subpoenaed Nintendo. I remember getting the email, opening the email, and I remember audibly just like yelling in the office, the Switch was powered on after the murder.
Nintendo can always see when a user is active when he logs in on Wi-Fi, because it's a network-enabled device.
All we needed was that one hit, the one connection to that internet. And once we got that, that would provide the IP address.
An IP address is a unique string of numbers that connects a device to the internet. Simple as that. Just think of it like a social security number. It's a unique identifier. I cannot tell you exactly where that switch is at the moment, but I can guarantee to tell you the location where it last logged into the network. The IP address came back to an apartment in Mobile on downtown Boulevard, and the owner name was Kenesha.
So when I interviewed Kenesha, I said, I just gotta ask you, has anybody been to your apartment recently with a Nintendo Switch?
I mean, I have a brother. I think he may have been there, so I didn't know.
And your brother's name is?
Taquez.
Taquez? Mm-hmm. She tells me her brother's Taquez Timmons.
Did he have a Switch? Yeah, I did.
Okay. He had a Switch, and he wanted to use my Wi-Fi to turn it on. And I knew right then and there that Tequez was involved in my homicide. I knew it.
When Detective Barton was interviewing Tequez Timmons, you know, despite the amount of trouble that he was in, the fact that he is facing a murder charge, he's caught. He's in this mindset where he don't want to tell or he don't want to snitch on somebody else.
We got to start with the truth.
There's a very big no snitching policy. For some people, maybe it makes them feel better to know that they didn't say the name, that they wrote the name instead. So he writes down the name of Derek Scott on a piece of paper and gives it to the detectives.
Hard starts over. You already gave me a name, man. And you already told me he's the one that did it. You just got to tell me how you know that and why.
Basically, what Tequez admitted is that he was driving with Derek Scott that morning of Wednesday, November 20th. They had already been breaking into homes pretty regularly. Derek would be the one who would break into the house, and Tequez would stand by to drive them, and then they'd split the profits of whatever they got from the houses. He said the specific time he had dropped Derek off kind of right around the house.
Like 30.
He said he comes back in that area, he picks up Scott, and Scott has a Nintendo Switch in his possession.
The dude came up out of the room and he shot me.
The Nintendo Switch was probably one of the first items that they picked up. That's when Professor Weiser came around the corner and startled him. And he was shot, and they fled.
And then Tequez said Derek didn't want the Switch. He said, man, sell it and give me half. And that's how Tequez got the Switch. I later found out Tequez Timmons sold the Switch to Kenesha, and then she sold it to somebody in Florida. And so we eventually tracked that person, and that's how we got the Switch.
Based on all of that, Tequez Timmons and Derek Scott were both charged with felony murder.
It was about as unnecessary a crime as has ever been committed. Matt was a big, rather gentle man. Matt was 39 years old. His 43rd birthday would have been 2 days ago.
I know very well.
And my son, but he was also one of my closer friends by that point.
How could you swim away? I knew I'd fight.
After Matt died, I actually texted him.
I'd find you here.
Of course, he was gone, so he never got the text, but I sent it anyhow.
I'd find